Hello again, everybody, and welcome into the Shelby County High School Football Show alongside Andrew Simonson. I'm Alec Etheredge, and we're through 3 weeks of the 2023 high school football season now as we look ahead to week 4 and another busy slate. We're coming off of what's going to be our busiest week of the season. 13 games taking place last week featuring Shelby County teams. This week, we've got another 11 games set to take place. All 4 of our 7A classification teams there in Class 7A Region 3 going to be battling against each other in county matchups too. So that's going to be a lot of fun, a lot to look forward to there. We've got some big Class 6A matchups as well in region play. One of them going to take place right here behind us. Our game of the week is the Briarwood Lions going to host the Pelham Panthers, and what's a big game now for both of these teams. Pelham opening region play, Briarwood sitting here at 1-0 in region play after a win last week on the road at Chilton County. So a lot to touch on that in that game, in particular looking at Pelham's situation and what they have coming up soon. Vincent going to be in a similar situation with the big game coming up next week. So you got some teams that have some big matchups coming up the next few weeks that can't get caught looking ahead. I have a feeling that's going to be a theme of this week's show. But Andrew, we're through 3 weeks of the high school football season. What is it so far, just looking at our county teams? What's something that's kind of stuck out to you so far this season?
What's kind of stuck out to me so far is just like the varying degrees of quarterback play that we've seen so far. We've seen some pretty incredible quarterback play so far from breakout players like Carson Acker and Brock Bradley, and we've also seen some teams with a few struggles as well. You can even throw Cason Fields into that good side of the discussion as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how those quarterbacks are going to continue to develop, especially since so many of them are so young. Just over these next few weeks as region play keeps going. Yeah,
I've been excited on the opposite end of the ball. I think that the defenses that we've seen this year has been really impressive just looking across the board. I just saw the Spain Park Hoover game last week, seeing Spain Park's defense. You saw a defensive showdown between Thompson and Vestavia. Helena's defense has been outstanding early in the season as well. So the defensive side of the football bit has been a whole lot of fun to me so far this season. But you look at what we've experienced at this point in the year, and we're sitting in good shape right now. We still have 7 teams undefeated, 5 in the AHSAA. We've got Cornerstone undefeated in the AISA, and we've got Evangel undefeated in the ACSC. So with that, I mean, it's been an incredible start, and we're just getting started right now.
Exactly, but even with these great starts, this is where the rubber meets the road. Yep. This is where all these teams are going to have to start proving themselves. Like you mentioned, a couple of big games looming on the horizon with Vincent and BB Comer and Helena and Pelham. And we've got some great ones this week as well that are really going to start to decide what these regions are going to look like.
Yeah, and it's going to be a fun week ahead. We've got, like I said, 11 total matchups taking place. So you go from your busiest week to another very busy week, and we've got a lot of excitement ahead. It's all region action, too, when it comes to our AHSA team. So going to be a big week for all of our local teams. We're going to break it all down on this week's show. We're also going to name our SCR Stars of the week at the end of the show as well. So a lot set to take place on this week's show. We're going to jump in and we're going to start with our game of the week right here at Briarwood Christian School as the Lions going to host the Pelham Panthers in a big one. As we jump into this week's show, we want to make sure to take a second and thank our sponsor, Consign Design, located in Alabaster at 72 Fulton Springs Road. And it's one of the best consignment shops that you're going to find in the Birmingham metro area. 7 times they've been named the best consignment shop in Shelby County. They offer everything that you need. They take donations as well. So if you're looking to get some things off your hands, make sure to take them down there to Consign Design. 72 Fulton Springs Road. You're looking for jewelry, if you're looking for clothes, anything you could need, men, women, children, they've got it all there at Consign Design. So make sure you give them a call, 205-664-7540 if you've got any questions. Again, that's 205-664-7540, or visit them in person in Alabaster, 72 Fulton Springs Road. Tell them the Shelby County Reporter sent you. As we just mentioned, this is a big game for multiple reasons between Briarwood and Pelham. You look at these two teams right now, sitting on paper, you've got Pelham entering this game 2-0 off a bye week. Last year going into this matchup, sitting at 0-2 coming off that bye week. So a little bit of a different feel for Pelham as they kind of look to not get too confident early in the season as they open region play this week Briarwood in the opposite end started 0-2 this season. They bounced back to open region play with the win on the road last week against Chilton County. They start to build some confidence, and that's something that I kind of saw coming. Literally the only game that I got right that Andrew did not last week is Andrew's off to a hot and flying start so far this season, sitting at 30-2 overall with his picks this season. He went 12-1 last week. I went 10-3. I'm now 28-4 overall. But I saw Briarwood kind of taking that next step a week ago on the offensive side of the ball. Not really sure they did that on the offensive side, but they put up more points. And a lot of that's been because the defense has just been so tremendous. They've put the offense in good positions, and that's what we saw a week ago. So Andrew, when we jump into this game between these two teams and you look at what the important key factor is in this matchup, you've got a 2-0 Pelham team, but that's wiped clean. This is their first region game. For Briarwood, they start 0-2, but now they've got that first region win under their belt, playing with some confidence finally. So you look at those two storylines coming into this one. What is it that's so important, and what's going to be the key factor when you look at these two teams?
I think it's going to be a lot of what we're going to see from Briarwood in terms of progression. We obviously saw some good signs from them last week. Obviously, 24 points against a Chilton County team, still going to be good enough to win, and there are some decent stats put up by both the passing game and the running game. But this is a different animal in Pelham, and a second-round playoff team from a year ago. Somebody who's already beaten Oak Mountain and gotten off to a 2-0 start against some pretty good-looking teams, and done so in pretty great fashion. But it's that defense for Briarwood, like you mentioned, that just keeps them in games and has been performing really well, even against some really stout opponents, multiple 7A opponents in their non-conference play. And I'm just really excited to see how both defenses show up. I do think that Pelham has a little bit more of an edge on offense, but I think that both of these two defenses, we've seen enough out of them this year that they could both show up and play really well in this game.
Yeah, it's and that's the thing. I mean, you look at this game this year. Last year, like I said, 0-2 for Pelham coming into this matchup. Briarwood was sitting in good shape. They had an exciting start to last season, and it kind of unbuckled after this game, but they were sitting at number 7 coming into this matchup a year ago, so they kind of had that upper hand. This year, they're going to feel a little bit disrespected, I think, on their home field after losing that game a year ago, 35-34, as Pelham upsets Briarwood on their home field last year. This year, you look at this matchup, Pelham, I think that they're about as good as they were a year ago. Briarwood still looking for that next offensive step, and last year, they somewhat had that with Christopher Vizina at the quarterback position. They had some pieces around him, but they just never could get that quarterback to receiver connection, and that's kind of been the struggle the last few years. This game in particular, I think that's going to be a huge key, because you look at Briarwood last week, Will Clark had 86 yards on the ground, 16 carries, and 2 touchdowns for Briarwood. So running the football, they had some success, but when you're going up against a Pelham team that has hopes of winning a region championship, you're going to have to be more than one-dimensional. You're going to have to be able to throw the football, and they're going to have to find that this week, whereas Pelham, from what I've seen so far, and you and I have both seen them this season, that defense looks really, really good. Will Felton, solid at linebacker. Bishop Rella's been outstanding so far this year. So this is a Pelham defense that's going to be ready, especially if you just try to come out and run the ball, and that's all you can do. So how does Briarwood take that next step when it comes to the passing game to have something else to throw at this Pelham defense?
Well, I think having a dual threat quarterback is really going to help them, because obviously, like you said, while they do have that added element of being able to run the ball, there are no slouches with their arms either. And they showed last week, Will Clark did, that he can get some plays going to these receivers and get some offense going that way. I think we've seen a lot of good athleticism from this Briarwood team so far. And I think that overall they're going to have enough to make this a really good game against Pelham. Obviously, Pelham has some elite talent on defense, like you mentioned, but I think that we're really going to start seeing a little bit more of who Briarwood is this week. Now they're up against more of a truer test of who they are versus, say, Chilton County or some of these other 7A teams that they've been facing. So I'm excited to see that next step for Briarwood going forward. And I think that we're going to start seeing that more in the passing game as Will Clark develops as a quarterback. Still his first year starting, you have to remember.
So is this going to be a week that they can take that next step fully to be able to walk away victorious against Pelham?
I think that Pelham's offense is going to make the difference, and that's why I give them the victory here. I've just seen more from Pelham's offense that they've been able to do it with both ends of the ball, with the passing game and the running game. And I think that their defense just has a slight edge, even though I am still really liking Briarwood's defense. To this point, I think this has the potential to be a great defensive battle between the two teams, but I think that Pelham's going to find a way to make a couple of key plays to pull away into this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think Will Clark's going to be the X factor for Briarwood. What he's able to do as far as bringing multiple things to the table, if he comes out, has a good football game in this one, and is able to keep that Pelham defense kind of off balance and having to guard pretty much the entire field, that's going to be the biggest key when it comes to Briarwood's chances to win this game. I do think their defense keeps them in it, but it's going to have to be the offense that kind of takes them over the top if they want to walk away with a win. But you look at Pelham, I think that they've kind of, from what we've seen so far, they should be a little bit better than they were last year, and I think that's going to carry into this game. They've just got too many weapons on both sides of the ball that we've seen proven to this point in the season. So I agree. I think Pelham's going to walk away with a victory, but this is going to be a very physical and hard-fought game. So whoever does win this football game, if you've got Pelham sitting at 1-0 in region play, if they win 3-0 overall, Briarwood, if they win 2-0 in the region and they even up that overall record, this is going to be a big, big game for both of these teams moving forward, especially with what we've got down the line and what's going to be an exciting region. We've got all four of our Class 7A teams taking on another local Class 7A team this week in Region 3. And we're going to start with the Thompson Warriors and Spain Park Jaguars. A big matchup here in region play as we were on the opposite end of this matchup last week. Andrew, you get to see Thompson take on Vestavia Hills. And what was an exciting game for a while. Thompson pulls away a little bit late. I get to see the other one. I see Spain Park take on Hoover. They lose in a tight battle, 28-20. It was kind of a defensive battle for the most part, but an exciting game there. And I walked away, honestly, as impressed as I would have had Spain Park won, which I did pick them to win that football game. But at the end of the night, the way that they played as a strong defensive team alongside with really what became a one-dimensional offense because of injuries, still able to put up points. So I walked away impressed in that game. I know that it was a hard-fought win for Thompson on the other end of this game. So take me through a little bit of what you saw from Thompson in that matchup with Vestavia Hills and how it can lend them forward and give them a good opportunity to win this game against Spain Park on Friday. Yeah,
in such a low-scoring game, I was very, very impressed by Thompson's defense throughout the contest. Holding Vestavia Hills, not just a top 5 team in 7A, but a top 5 offense in 7A. So just 3 points on the night, getting 2 crucial interceptions off quarterback John Paul Head, one early in the game from Jaden Davis, and the other one, the crucial game-sealing pick from Caleb Harris. I think that both of those made the difference, and just overall the pressure that they brought on Vestavia Hills, forcing them to be a bit more of a running team than I kind of expected. I think that it was easily the difference throughout the game, and I was as impressed as anything from them. I think that the more they continue that on throughout the season, the better off they're going to be, and I really don't know if there's much of a challenge that they won't be up for throughout this season. Flipping over to the offense, I was impressed with, even though Vestavia brought a very good pass defense and was able to secure some interceptions throughout the game, I was impressed by how Thompson was able to establish the run and just kind of match Vestavia on what they were doing and just put themselves in positions later in the game where they could wear the defense down and just take advantage with a couple of late scores. So all around, even though it was obviously a little bit more of a slow start from Thompson, kind of what we saw in week 1 as well, albeit with more points against Opelika than we saw against Vestavia Hills. I was still really impressed by both ends, both the offense and the defense, and I'm excited to see how both of those will continue to develop, because I still think that both sides have a good ways to go in terms of their development.
Yeah, I think that Spain Park's defense is what really stood out to me as well. And you look at Thompson, that's a team, if their defense plays like that, they should win a state championship again this season. They've got it in the secondary right now. You look at Caleb Harris, you look at Anquan Fagans, and everything else that they've got on that defensive side of the football, replacing so much talent this season, really in the front seven in the last 2 seasons, but the back end of that defense is loaded with talent at Thompson. Well, Spain Park is loaded as well. They may not be quite as deep as Thompson is from a depth standpoint, but that's a defense last week that they were physical and they were in the backfield a ton against that Hoover offense, and it really is what gave Spain Park a chance to win that game. You look at the offensive side for the Jaguars, it's an offensive side of the football that became one-dimensional. They were down at one point their top 2 running backs. They were down their second receiver, and so it basically became Brock Bradley throwing the football, and it was predictable. I mean, it was predictable, and there was a point in that game where you just wondered, are they ever going to try to establish a run? And then you start to see the injuries pile up there, and that became a big difference there in that matchup. But ultimately, Spain Park battled. They battled and battled and battled, and they had a chance to win that game. They got the ball late, had a chance to tie. They took the early lead in that game. They had their opportunities. They ultimately had several special teams blunders that cost them, with 3 blocked kicks in every facet of the game. Really had a blocked punt, blocked extra point, and a blocked field goal. At the end of the day, without those, good chance that they win that football game. So if Spain Park can fix up some of those mistakes on the special teams front, this defense is really talented, and we just saw Thompson struggle for the better part of 3 quarters against Vestavia, who has a very good and physical defense. So if Spain Park comes out with that physical nature on the defensive side, they're going to be on their home field again. You expect that this is going to be a tighter battle, kind of like that. The question becomes, that Thompson defense that we just talked about with the secondary that they have, can Spain Park find something else that's going to open up some balance there on the offensive side?
And I'm not really sure they will, just because of the obvious talent gap between Spain Park and Vestavia Hills. But I think the one great equalizer for Spain Park is their heart and their mentality. We've seen over the past few weeks, and especially against Hoover, this is a team with a heavyweight mentality, as Coach Vikak has preached all summer long. They just keep rising up from every single blow that they take, and they act like they have a chance in every single game, no matter who they face. And that's something that you need against Thompson, because part of the battle against Thompson is that mental factor. Going up against the big giants, going up against Tyson Fury, Muhammad Ali, the big giant heavyweight champion of the division. I wouldn't necessarily call Spain Park Rocky Balboa, but definitely more of the underdog in that analogy. But I think whatever comes out of this game, I think we're going to see Spain Park prove once again that they can equalize basically any opponent on the field with the coaching, with the heart, the mentality, with everything that goes on to just level the playing field mentally, even if they face a talent gap in any sort of way. We're going to see a lot of that this week with some of the running back injuries, if those aren't able to come back healthy later this week. But I think that even though I am predicting a Thompson win, I think that Spain Park, like you said, and like you saw against Hoover, they're going to impress, and I think that they're going to be a solid team going forward.
Yeah, I think this is a big test. If they can play close in this game, just like they did against Hoover, then all of a sudden the rest of the way, this is a team that's going to battle for one of those final 2 spots in the region when it comes to that 3rd and 4th seed in the playoffs. I do think that Thompson's going to walk away with the win in this one, and it simply boils down to that secondary. If you've got a team in Spain Park that's going to come out and have to throw the football a lot, it's not the secondary you want to be facing in doing so. I think a big key for Spain Park, if they want to keep this game close, one, the defense is going to have to come out and play well. That's an obvious statement. But is Reggie Jackson healthy? He was out last week. Is he going to be back healthy? Went out after a couple of plays a week ago and was really making an early statement in that game. If they've got him and Jonathan Bibbs for Brock Bradley to throw the football to, that's going to be a huge key. And then either the Shanks brothers, are they going to be able to go? Our other big 7A matchup between 2 local teams, that's going to be Chelsea hosting Oak Mountain, and what's always an exciting rivalry matchup around here, and it's one that kind of splits where we are right now here at Briarwood Christian Schools. You've got Oak Mountain just down the road, you've got Chelsea just over the mountain here, and they do the fun battle at the Chick-fil-A right down the road from here, the intersection of 119 and 280 with Spirit Week, as they'll go head to head and see who can raise the most money there as well. So it's just a fun rivalry battle when these two get together, and I think that's exactly what both need right now. You look at both of these teams and the struggles that they've had early in the season, sitting at 1-2. both off to 0-1 starts in region play as Chelsea falls to Tuscaloosa County on the road last week. And that was a game where they had their chances and then they just let it get away from them late in that matchup. As for Oak Mountain, they host you at Trussville and they just lay an egg on the offensive side of the football and really the defensive side as well, but that's going to happen a lot when your defense is on the field the majority of the game. So you look at that, and these are two teams that going into their second region matchup, sitting at 1-2 right now on the season, 0-1 in region play, and both need a big win this week.
Yeah, and I think both of these teams are pretty well matched because we've seen similar strengths from both of them, and we've probably seen about the same talent level from each of these teams considering who they've played to start out the season. So I think that we're in for a very good matchup here in this battle for Highway 280, and I think that you also have to consider the fact that this was Chelsea's lone win last year, and they got it at Herdmont Park. So Oak Mountain is going to be coming into Chelsea's place looking very motivated, and you know that they have this one circled on the calendar ready to try to get their revenge. Rivalries are always intense. This one just adds even more fuel to the fire, so I'm excited to see how that happens, and I think the big difference here is going to be the running back play. We've seen some good quarterback play from both teams, but it hasn't been the dominant focus of each team. We've seen running be the main focus from both, and I think that both of these teams have strong running backs to solidify that status as good running teams. With Chelsea, you see Emerson Russell be the entire offense and just be the heart and soul of that unit, just continuing to rack up big yards and big touchdowns every single week. He continues to look like one of the best running backs in the county. I think he's going to continue to prove that this week just because we haven't really seen him slow down at all this season, so don't expect that to happen anytime soon. And for Oak Mountain, I think that we're going to see a little bit more from their two-headed monster, Marty Myricks, a little bit of Cameron Meadows as well. Will Odell getting into the mix as well. They have a lot of great running weapons versus Chelsea just having the one and Emerson Russell. So I think that dynamic of just being able to be more versatile within the thing that you're good at in your running game is going to be crucial for them. And I think that both of these teams bring solid run defenses as well. So I'm interested to see how those match up against these star running backs as well.
So which one's going to be the difference maker and which one walks away victorious?
I have Oak Mountain in a very close game here simply because of what we saw against Pelham. And I think that they have a little bit more of a complete offense. We've seen some more of the passing game from them. I just don't have a bunch of confidence right now in Chelsea's passing game to just kind of open up the field once they get that running game established. Although Emerson Russell is great, we've seen the offense become a little too reliant on him. And I think that that's really the difference, is that Oak Mountain is able to get it done in more ways. And we've seen them do it against some pretty solid opponents so far. I think that they're going to use last week against Hewitt Trussville as a good learning experience against a very solid opponent who, obviously, we know how far Oak Mountain has come from last year, but Hewitt is still a step above them within the region.
Yeah, I think that you look at this matchup on paper, and these two teams are identical. Mm-hmm. The big difference that you see for Oak Mountain is they've got a quarterback in Will Odell who can do some different things as a physical presence that you have to guard in addition to the running backs, and that could be what makes the difference. But ultimately what I've seen the last few weeks is that Chelsea kind of has that potential to score more points, and they're going to have to show that this week. Emerson Russell's a guy that can do multiple things out of the backfield, and he's going to have a monster game. But when you look at these two teams, very evenly matched. Chelsea's at home. That's the only thing I can see that has anything that can make a difference in this matchup. But like you said last year, Chelsea goes on the road and wins, so could be Oak Mountain that goes on the road and does it this season. I do think Will Odell, if they win, is going to be that X factor. I think he makes the difference. But at the end of the night, Chelsea, from what I've seen, they've had chances. They win 2 weeks ago to get some confidence. Last week, had chances late in that game and just couldn't make the plays defensively. And both of these teams struggling defensively right now. So this could be the game where their offense has a breakout for both of them. But I think Emerson Russell, just such a dynamic athlete, can change a game. And I ultimately think he's going to be the factor that makes the difference in this one. We'll jump into the 6A classification now, and we've got a big matchup we're going to talk about to kick that off, and that's going to be the Helena Huskies as they host Chilton County this week in a very key region matchup. And we were just talking about it off camera a second ago. This is a game last year that went into overtime. Helena trailed a lot of that game, ended up having to win 35-28 in overtime. And the two of us kind of think looking ahead is the ultimate difference in this game. If Helena gets caught looking ahead, that could make a big difference in the outcome of this matchup. We saw, I think that's kind of what happened last year because of what's looming the week after, and that's a big rivalry battle, one of the best rivalries in the state right now between Helena and Pelham, and this year could be elevated even further. But the last couple of years, the winner of this one, they're going to have a chance to win a region championship.
Exactly.
That's the same thing we're going to see this year. So you look at that and you think about the excitement of that battle, but how does Helena stay in the moment this week, especially when you see what Chilton County coming off that loss last week to Briarwood?
Yeah, I think that Helena, they just really need to be confident in what they have and just kind of do what they've done for the first 3 weeks of the season. Go out, take care of business, and make sure you don't get caught looking, because this is a Helena team that has all the weapons on both sides of the field to easily take care of Chilton County. Because they struggled last week against Briarwood, Helena is definitely a step above Briarwood in that regard, and I think that they'll have the tools and everything to make it a pretty easy game if they want it to be. But like we saw last year, Chilton County can make this a very difficult test for them if they want, and that is the exact opposite of what you want before a big rivalry game, is a grueling test that you have before a hugely emotional game the week after. So I think that if Helena just comes out and does what they've been doing so far, just establishing a strong run game and taking care of the passing game with some explosive plays, I think that they should win this game comfortably. But we've seen what happens in the past when they don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, and I think that head coach Richie Busby is going to use last year as an example with how tight that game was, having to go into overtime. Ultimately, Helena ends up missing out on the playoffs even after winning that game. It just kind of became a spiral at the end of the season. So they know that each week they've got to be 100% focused, or things can go south in a hurry. So you look at this one, in Chilton County, coming off a tough loss to Briarwood last week, really didn't play well in that game, especially on the offensive side and really on the defensive side either. So you look at that coming into this one. I think a big factor, Helena on their home field. Going to Chilton County is kind of a little bit of an odd road game. It feels a little bit further away than it actually is, and I think that plays a factor into it sometimes too. So now back at home with the talent they have, probably should be a big benefit for Helena this week.
Definitely, and I think the other thing that's going to benefit Helena is a lot of that defense that we saw against Homewood last week. They came out and really made a statement despite a slow start to just kind of pull away in the second half and just really show against what we've regarded as one of the top teams in Class 6A Region 3 over the past few years, to just really establish themselves on that front and be able to enable their offense to just go out and do what they do and that score points. I think that that's been really good and really key for them, is to just be able to hold up on that defensive end. And I think that that's going to be key again here, where even if the offense somehow has a slow week here or anywhere down the road, you can at least count on your defense to just keep you in that game and give you a chance to win.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it sounds like you're going with Helena from what I understood there. But you look at this, they've got the talent on offense. They've got Carson Acker stepping up. We saw Torrey Ward really step up last week at the receiver position. And beyond that, they've obviously got Hunter Hell. Carson Acker's been a great quarterback for them, probably the most dynamic they've had in a few years. And you mix that in with a strong offensive line with Jordan Washington, Jeremy Spratling, talented offense. But then you get over to that defense, Joseph Roberto, Nate Thomason, Kevin Pinkert in the secondary. This is a very talented defense as well. If they stay healthy, that's a huge balance. And we saw it last week. They fall behind 10-0 early in that game. Well, guess what? They scored 31 in a row. Defense buckled down, offense got going, and that's how quick of a shift this team can take. I think this week they're going to be 100% focused. They know that they can control everything if they are focused on their home field, and then they know, okay, now we can shift our focus into that big rivalry matchup. That takes us to another big matchup in Class 6A Region 3 as the Calera Eagles going to host the Homewood Patriots in a battle of two 0-3 teams at this point in the season. I'm not sure we really expected that to be a combined 0-6 game between the two teams. Homewood you typically expect to be battling for a region championship, but they're off to their struggles, and both of these teams struggling on both sides of the ball right now, giving up 36 plus points per game on the defensive side, and then you look at the two offenses scoring 16 or less. So when you look at those numbers, you at least think, okay, well, this is our chance. This is our chance to get right. We've got an opportunity going up against another team that's struggling. Let's get some momentum. Let's go into this game with some confidence that we can walk away with the win.
Definitely, and I think both teams have reason to be confident about this game because Calera, even though they struggled last week against Benjamin Russell, I think that we saw some really good signs out of that second half against Chelsea that if they can start putting some of that momentum together on offense and taking advantage of the raw talent that they have, because they do have some pretty good talent, even though it isn't experienced, over on Calera's side, I think that they could start to make a little bit of noise here, and they could definitely make this game competitive. As for Homewood, they're off their own struggles as well, replacing talent, but I think that one thing that they could take solace in was that first half last week against Helena. Obviously struggling in those first two games against John Carroll and Gustavia Hills, but I think that what they were able to do last week against Helena, even though it was a little bit of a slow start for the Huskies, I think that putting up some points early and being in control early in that game against a talented team, I think their takeaway isn't necessarily going to be obviously giving away that lead and ending up being a bit of a dominant win for Helena. I think some of their takeaway is going to be, we can hang in there with some of the best of the region, despite all the talent that we've lost from last year and all of the struggles that we've had so far. We could still do this. So I think that both Homewood and Calera have a great reason to come into this game thinking that this is going to be their get-right game, and that makes it really exciting for both teams because you know that they're both going to be motivated, and that always makes for a good contest.
So which one do you think does get right at this point in the season?
I think it's going to be Homewood just because of what we've seen so far. We've seen a little bit more of their offense and defense rise to the challenge when they've been presented it. Calera has shown that in spots, but not consistent enough to give me hope that they're going to ultimately come away with this. But I think that the one thing that they have is home field advantage in this. Obviously, Homewood having to make a little bit of a trek down to Calera, I think that could also play a key factor here. But I think that ultimately Homewood is going to walk away with this. In a close game, though, I do think it's going to be really close.
Yeah, you look at this battle, and I agree. I mean, I think Homewood's going to win this matchup, ultimately because they're a little bit more battle-tested. These are two teams that obviously sitting at 0-3, as we've mentioned, Homewood played a little bit more challenging of a schedule so far. I think they're going to build off that confident early start that they had last week. Put up 17 points on a really good Helena defense a week ago. So I think they built off of that, got off to a fast start. I think they're going to try to get off to another fast start this week against Calera. But that said, these are two teams struggling on both sides of the ball. I think Calera is going to be able to do some things, kind of like you said, build off of that game against Chelsea. Go back, watch that film, what worked right in that second half against Chelsea that gave them some success. And I think they're going to have that focus this week of knowing this is an opportunity to beat a well-known team out of not only our region, but the Birmingham metro area and the state. So a great opportunity, even though both of these are sitting at 0-3, great opportunity for Calera to at least try to make a statement with a win over a big-name team. At the end of the day, though, I think Homewood a little bit more battle-tested. I think that's what makes the ultimate difference. That takes us down to the 5A classification, where we've got the Shelby County Wildcats hitting the road to take on rival Jemison in what's a huge win if the Wildcats want any chance to make the playoffs this season. You look at this Shelby County team and it continues to be the same story, coming off a 41-18 loss to Holtville last week. Defense struggled, but it's the offense that continues to not be able to score enough points so far this season. They've got to find a way this week for both sides of the ball to click against a struggling Jemison team if Shelby County wants any chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah, this is where it needs to come together. This was a game that Shelby County won pretty handily last year against one of the worst teams within the region. So if it's going to happen anytime, it needs to happen now. And I do think that there are some signs, though, that they are going to be able to put it together this week. Obviously, scoring 18 last week against Holtville, showing a little bit of signs there. Ryan Sipes able to throw for 232 yards. But I still think that Shelby County's strength lies in their run game with Devin Alexander and some of the dynamic things that he's able to do both as a pass catcher and as a ball handler. And I don't think that Shelby County has really been able to use that as much as they probably need to in order to get the most success out of him. So I think that he's really going to be the X factor here, and he really needs to step up in order to kind of unlock what this offense is really going to be. Obviously, the passing game still has some bright stars there, but I think that's that aspect of the ball that's going to come into a key factor here. But the defense is really going to make the difference here. We saw 2 great performances from them early in the season. A little bit of a down performance last week against Holtville. So what we're really going to see here is which side is really going to show up here now in region play. Is it going to be last week, or is it going to be the first 2 weeks? Based off what I've seen so far, I think it's more likely to be some of the performance that we saw against West Blockton and Montevallo, which I think is going to be enough to give Shelby County the edge here. I think defense gives them enough to be able to put up a couple of scores here within the offense, and I think that's going to make the ultimate difference here, is that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and we talked about Shelby County's offensive struggles. Jemison scoring just 16 points per game so far this season as well. They lose their last 2 games 41-21 and 22-0 after a season opening win of 27-26 against Thorsby. So they're struggling offensively. Shelby County's defense needs to come out and make a statement. Won this game 23-6 last year. And I think these 2 teams very similar to what we saw a season ago on both sides of the ball. I don't think Jemison going to be able to score enough points against that Shelby County defense. It's going to play more like it did last year and a couple of weeks ago against Montevallo. And like you said, Sipes had a good performance at the quarterback position, yardage-wise. They've got to protect the football. I think they've got that talent there. It's just a matter of doing that, protecting the football and having some of those big plays. If they can do that this week, they should be able to pull away. But either way, I think that this defense is good enough. I think the offense is going to make enough plays to at least give them the win, and they need it. This is a big win if Shelby County, big game if Shelby County wants any chance to make the playoffs this season. The Montevallo Bulldogs now sitting at 2-0 overall in the season after last week's win, 33-21 against Hale County. Obviously opened with that rivalry win against Shelby County a week earlier, and this is a team that's doing some things right. They fall behind early in that game last week, 21-7. They trailed by 14 twice in that first half, but they respond with 26 unanswered against Hale County to walk away with that 33-21 win. Now they get a Dallas County team sitting at 0-2 with losses of 48-20 and 70-12. So you look at that, you got 0-2 team, 2-0 team. One team's got confidence, one team has none, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, Andrew. So I don't think there's much that really needs to be talked about. It feels like and that could be a trap, but it feels like this should be Montevallo's game to walk away with.
Yeah, it really does. You never want to count out the home team, in this case being Dallas County here, but it does feel like Montevallo is setting themselves up for a really strong win, and they kind of need a good 4-quarter performance here after struggling early against Shelby County and against Hale County last week. I think that this Dallas County game really presents them a good chance to play 4 quarters of football, clean up some things on both the offense and defense, and just really kind of morph into more of a version of what we've seen in Montevallo over the last few years, as just a very complete team that's really able to get things done. I think that they've looked strong in both their passing games and in their running game this season so far, so I think this is going to be a pretty easy win for Montevallo as they continue to progress into what we hope is a playoff team this year.
Yeah, I mean, the offense starting to gain some confidence. Struggled a little bit week 1 against Shelby County, but started to gain that confidence last week as they scored those 26 unanswered, and it came in multiple facets of the game as well. Javon Rogers had a big game at receiver in the return game on special teams as well. So you got all facets clicking, special teams, offense playing better, defense has played well so far this season. Really bounced back after a slow start defensively last week. This week, I think that defense continues to play well, and I think the offense is going to really take that next step, make a statement. I think Montevallo also walks away with a win. Coming into the season, I really wasn't sure just how Vincent would follow up that historic year last year. I really didn't know what was going to happen because they had so many key pieces to replace. I knew they were going to have opportunities. I knew they had some talent back. But going into last year, this team had not started 3-0 since 2001, and now in back-to-back seasons, they are 3-0 as they get off to another 3-0 start this season with a big win last week, and now they get a big road trip to Fayetteville. And really the biggest aspect of this game, kind of like we talked about earlier in the show with both Helena and Pelham not looking ahead, Vincent has that biggest game on the schedule next week on a Thursday night in the game of the week in the state. So how do you keep your focus on this week and a road trip to Fayetteville, looking to continue that momentum and not take a step back in what could be a trap game for them?
I think the key to avoid it being a trap game is to just take care of business early. Obviously, you want to be able to be in a position where you can rest players, but this is still a 2A roster that, even with Vincent's size, is still not really going to be able to do a ton of that. So they're going to want to keep their players as fresh as possible going into next week, and a lot of that boils down to just coming out strong, getting a hot start like we saw against Central Coosa last week on both offense and defense, taking care of business early, and then just being able to cruise on into that next week. And I think that we've seen the goods from them so far, between Cason Fields at quarterback, Raquelis Robertson at running back, all of the strength around them, receivers, defense. It just feels like everything is clicking for this Vincent team. And we obviously saw some really good signs within their first 2 games, but I don't think we were expecting that big of a jump into week 3 against Central Coosa. Yeah,
I think that was you look at that game last week, I did not see them scoring 57 points and pulling off a 57-0 shutout. It matches kind of what they were able to do last year, but didn't know the offense had that, especially basically in one half of football, to be able to put up that kind of production at this point in the season. So that's got to be a huge confidence boost for a team that already entered the season with that belief now that they can win football games. And that's what they didn't have for so long. They gained it last year, and now this team capitalizing on that early in the season. So you look at that, the offense has a breakout game, scores 57 points. They had scored 29 the first 2 weeks in both of those games, and the defense now has back-to-back shutouts going into this matchup against Fayetteville. So Andrew, you look at that, what's the outcome of this game between these 2 teams?
I think Vincent wins, and I think they win big. I think that they're going to do exactly what I hope that they'll do. Based off that last segment, I think that they're going to come out early, come out strong, know that they need to take care of business early, just so that they can just go ahead and move on and focus on that big game against BB Comer next Thursday.
Yeah, you look at this. This is an improved Fayetteville team from what we saw last year. Last year, the Wolves entered this game sitting at 0-2 with 50-18 loss and a 47-12 loss. So 0-2 last year. This year, a 50-26 win. So they've got a win under their belt, and their loss was 38-19. So a team that's playing a little bit better early in the season than they were last year. Vincent won that one 53-0, similar to what we saw them do last week. So it's tough to tell. They could go out and win this one 53-0 again this year, or it could be a little bit closer because Fayetteville is an improved team. I think it's going to be a little bit closer for a while, but Vincent, if they can come out and get off to that fast start, that's going to be a huge shot of momentum for them early in this game. But they know that there's a big matchup looming. They've got to stay focused on this one, or this will be one of those games that could end up being a trap. At the end of the day, though, Vincent's got the momentum, they've got the confidence, they've got the playmakers on both sides of the football. Defense playing way too well, even with a lot of those guys playing on both sides of the ball. I think that's the X factor in this one. I think Vincent going to improve to 4-0, which is going to set up what could likely be a big top 5 showdown with BB Comer a week later. It's our biggest week of the AISA and ACSC so far this season. We've got 3 matchups taking place, and all 3 going to be pretty big, but especially for Cornerstone and Evangel, Andrews. We look at those 2 matchups. Cornerstone going to be at Springwood. We've also got Coosa Valley at Pickens, and then Evangel at Freedom. So we've got all 3 teams on the road, all 3 in big matchups. What are you looking forward to, and what are your predictions for these 3 games?
I think for Cornerstone, this is the biggest matchup I'm looking forward to this season, just because I know that this is the biggest matchup that they're looking forward to this season. They came down to the wire last season, battling out the regional champs, the eventual regional champs last year, and getting a 2-point win in regular season. But in the semifinals, we saw a completely different story. A Cornerstone team that just fell short in the playoffs. They've had that chip on their shoulder ever since. They've had that game circled on their calendar. They don't want a repeat of what happened last year. And if they want to go even further into the state title game this year, a lot of that's probably going to take a regional championship. And a good start to that will be beating the defending champs here. So I think that we saw a complete game from Cornerstone last week, being able to get some big dynamic plays on offense, as well as some good plays on defense, including a pick 6 to get some scores over on that side of the ball. So I think you've got a Cornerstone team that's really clicking on all fronts from their first 3 games. And so I think that with that, you can expect a Cornerstone win. which would be a great statement to open up their season so far. Moving now to Coosa Valley, kind of on the opposite end of the ball, still struggling to get that momentum going, being held scoreless in their first 3 games. I think this Pickens game offers one of the better opportunities to pick up that win, though, simply because while they were shut out last year, Coosa Valley, they only allowed 26 against Pickens. So if any game is going to be a get-right game for Coosa Valley, this certainly presents one of the opportunities. I still think that Pickens is going to win, just because we still haven't really seen anything from that Coosa Valley side on either the offense or the defense. And moving over to Evangel and the Freedom Cowboys, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better game nationally than these two, simply because it's a national title game rematch of the last 2 years. Evangel has had their number, though. Each of the last 4 times, Evangel has taken this matchup over the last 2 seasons, including in the last 2 national championship games. You know that Freedom is going to have this one circled on their calendar, because I know Tim Smith is expecting that. So this is where we need to see that 4-quarter performance that I was talking about last week, that I need to see out of Evangel to truly believe that they can go out and win that 6th straight national championship game. I think that this is going to be that game where they can start proving that. They won this game big in each of the last 4 matchups. I don't think it's going to be as big here, just because of the talent on both sides of the ball. But I think Evangel, at the end of the day, they've got the weapons, they got the talent to walk away with another win in this matchup.
Yeah, I'll get to that game in a second. It's funny how I thought last year Evangel was the best it's ever been. Now this year may be the best they've ever been. But as far as Cornerstone Springwood, like you said, big game. Cornerstone won the game in the regular season last year in a shootout that went down to the wire. Then they'll ultimately end up losing after that 52-50 win in the regular season, 50-8 there in the postseason in the semifinals of the AISA 8-man playoffs. This year's the Cornerstone team that's scoring a lot of points, playing well defensively, 46-12, 56-0, and 52-16 to get to 3-0 on the season. But it's a Springwood team that's also playing well. I think this is going to be a very, very good football game. You've got Springwood sitting at 4-0 right now. These are 2 teams that are going to go out there, give it their all, and ultimately, I mean, that's a big swing. You got to see, if you're Cornerstone, are you going to be able to be the team that won this game 52-50 last year in a shootout? Are you going to be the team that so far this season has won games basically around an average of 50-12? Or are you going to be the team that lost this game 50-8 last year in the postseason? And I think that's what I'm focusing on. I think Cornerstone's going to make this a close game. They're going to be hungry, determined. It will be more similar to what we saw in the regular season last year, but ultimately got to see them prove it against a Springwood team that beat them by 42 points in the postseason last year. If they've made that change and they win this game going away, that's an impressive thing and puts them as the favorite, in my opinion, to win the 8-man title this year. As for Coosa Valley, they've given up 50 points or more in every game, scored 0 through 3 games. This is their best chance against a Pickens team that has been outscored 113-14 so far this season, so also struggling on both sides of the ball. But ultimately, they've scored points and they haven't lost as bad so far this year. So it's kind of, which one do you think is going to have that better performance this go around? I think it'll be similar to last year's game, a 26-0 shutout there for Pickens. And as for Evangel, like I said, this is a team that is playing so well defensively in 8-man football. It's just impressive to see. And when you're playing that well defensively, gives your offense a whole lot more time and chances and opportunities to score a lot of points in 8-man play, which bodes well if you're a team that's on the field a lot offensively. So I think Evangel, the way they're playing this year, sitting at 5-0, just continuing to get better on both sides of the ball, I think you're going to see Evangel pick up a win as well in that matchup as they look to improve to 6-0 in what's a big, big game there against Freedom. That takes us to our SCR Stars of the Week segment. Before we jump into that, I want to thank our sponsor one last time on the show this week, Consign Design, located in Alabaster at 72 Fulton Springs Road, one of the best consignment shops in the Birmingham metro area. Make sure to visit them out there in Alabaster. 7 times they've been named the best consignment shop in Shelby County. Give them a visit at 72 Fulton Springs Road. You can donate items, you can pick up whatever you need, men, women, children, clothing, jewelry, whatever you need. They've got it out there at Consign Design. But Andrew, that takes us to our SCR Stars of the Week, opening week of region play, and we had some standout performers. I'll start with you, get your 2 Stars of the Week, and then we'll finish it up.
Yeah, exactly. And there were so many different deserving players throughout the roster that was really hard to choose just a couple. but I did land on a couple, and my first is AJ Green, running back out of Thompson, somebody I got to see in person last week, and his 27 carries for 134 yards, obviously very impressive, but even though he didn't find the end zone, what he really did throughout the game was just wear down Vestavia Hills' defense, work well both between the tackles and outside the tackles on the edges, and he was really able to find a lot of running room and was just able to establish that run game, enable Trent Seaburn and the receivers to just go out and have phenomenal days, and just be able to take that game late, just kind of wear down Vestavia Hills and get them to a point where they were on their heels a little bit and get them into that end zone for the next couple of times. So AJ Green, my first star of the week. And then moving on to my second star, somebody you got to see, Brock Bradley, quarterback out of Spain Park. 21 for 31 passing, an impressive performance for 249 yards and 2 touchdowns. But even more than that, he was able to do it without Reggie Jackson for most of the game, without both of the Shanks brothers in the backfield, dealing with 7 different running backs. Just a lot of different adversity and injury circumstances within Spain Park during that game, and he was still able to look confident, poised, and be able to lead the Spain Park team into a very impressive performance against a pretty solid Hoover team in a big rivalry game very early into his career.
Yeah, still a young quarterback, and he's able to make some big-time plays. Like you said, they knew that he was going to throw the ball, and he still goes for 249 yards and 2 touchdowns. Could have been a bigger night if he had Reggie Jackson opposite of Jonathan Bibbs, who we'll talk about in just a second. But my first star is going to go to Javon Rogers, who had a big-time game for Montevallo, really helped them step up. After falling behind 14-0, 21-7, he has a key punt return that kind of helps shift some momentum for a touchdown, and he also finished with 85 receiving yards and a touchdown on 7 catches there for the Bulldogs. Helped that offense kind of get some momentum moving forward. I think he's going to be a key playmaker. If they can have somebody else step up out wide, it's going to be a dangerous offense that I think is going to get better week by week. My second star of the week going to go to Joseph Roberto at Helena. A year away from the Huskies as he went to IMG Academy last year, but now he's back home, and I think he's fitting in perfectly with this scheme, with this Helena defense. Finished last week with 8 tackles, had a forced fumble, had a fumble recovery, and also offensively had a 15-yard touchdown run that was key for Helena as well. So playing extremely well early in the season as part of a great balanced defensive effort from Helena. We'll talk about a few more of those guys here in just a second, but our honorable mentions for the week, we're going to start with Thompson's Colbin Landrew, who had 81 yards on 5 receptions and 2 touchdowns, and that's big for them in this offense because with a young freshman quarterback in Trent Seaburn, the more weapons that he has, you look at guys like, obviously you mentioned AJ Green, Michael Dujon in the backfield, you look at the other guys out wide like Deuce Oliver and Colby Hearn, you're able to get a guy like Landrew, 6'5", 200 pounds, really physical, tall presence out there to step up. This is going to be a dangerous Thompson offense that's only going to be more and more productive throughout the year. But similar guy to that's going to be Jonathan Bibbs. Like you said a minute ago, we knew they were going to throw the football, and then we knew they were going to throw it to Jonathan Bibbs. He had 134 yards receiving and a touchdown despite Hoover knowing he was the one that was going to get the football. So an impressive showing from him. Over on that Helena defense that we just mentioned, Nate Thomason, Kevin Pinkard, 2 guys that really stepped up big in that game. Thomason, 9 tackles, a sack, and a fumble recovery for the Huskies in that win against Homewood. Really buckled down there defensively. Pinkard did as well, had 6 tackles and a key interception there in the secondary for that Helena defense. And one guy who we're going to mention just about every week on this show, it feels like, because of the amount of touches he gets, that's Emerson Russell. 25 carries, 107 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Really kept his team in that battle with Tuscaloosa County until late in that matchup. Also had 42 receiving yards on 5 catches in that game. I think that's what gives them a good chance against Oak Mountain, that balance that he offers out of the backfield. And right here behind us on this field Friday night, we're going to get to see Will Clark and Ryan Ham. Those 2 guys stepped up last week as well. Ham on the defensive side, a key interception in the first half that ended up leading to a late score there before the halftime break, gives Briarwood a 14-0 lead. I think sends them over the top in that win. And you look at Clark and all the things he's able to do as he continues to grow confidence here for Briarwood. It was really his legs that made the difference in that win on the road at Chilton County with 2 touchdowns, 86 yards on 16 carries there for the Lions. And for the Montevallo Bulldogs, Vincent Yellow Jackets, we've got a couple of players to mention as well between those 2 teams. Hunter Lutz at Montevallo part of a balanced effort for the Bulldogs. 10 total tackles, very strong night for them defensively. Several guys stepped up and had 8+ tackles in that game. So Hunter Lutz ends up being the leading tackler, a great performance from him defensively. Rykellis Robertson at Vincent, 157 yards on 6 carries with 3 touchdowns there for the Yellow Jackets, and he's going to become a more and more dynamic player as this season continues to go along. So some great performances there in the opening week of region play. We've got some big games this week. Players going to step up again. You may hear some of these same names again next week. You may see some new faces. We'll have to see once we hit that second week of region play. That brings another show to a close. Andrew, it's going to be an exciting second week of region play. Like we've said, we've got 7 teams overall still undefeated. What are you looking forward to most as we hit this 4th week of the season?
I'm looking forward to most just seeing how Helena, Pelham, and Vincent are able to use these games to generate momentum ahead of their big matchups next week. I think that we're going to see all 3 of these teams come out and try to make a statement and not only just win this game physically, but get a head start in the next game mentally as well by putting up solid numbers on both offense and defense and really just showing their opponents next week, BB Comer for Vincent and Helena and Pelham showing each other that they're going to be in for a tough fight next week. And I'm really excited to see both of these games go down, not just this week, but also next week as well. But you can't discount any of those 3 matchups this week for those 3 teams because they're going to be very solid games all this week.
Yeah, I mean, we've got big games this week. I'm looking forward to seeing if those undefeated teams can continue to carry that confidence over. Obviously, as you just mentioned, if they do, big tests next week. We're going to have a couple of big games. We may have dual game of the weeks as well with Thursday night and Friday night. Vincent BB Comer on Thursday night, Helena and Pelham on Friday night. 2 of the biggest games we're going to get all year, and it's good to see that kind of excitement around Vincent for the 2nd year in a row as well. Got to take care of business this week. That's one thing I want to see how it unfolds. Can these teams stay focused week by week? So difficult right here in Central Alabama to be able to win on a weekly basis. So we'll see how that all unfolds on the field this Friday night. Andrew and I will be out covering several games for you. We've got our freelancers back this week as well, so we're going to have a fun night. We'll have our Facebook Live pregame show for you as well, so make sure to tune in to that. One of us will be right here at Briarwood, Pelham. One of us will be up the road likely at Spain Park, Thompson. We'll have that for y'all on Friday night. So make sure you tune in. Thanks everybody for tuning into the Shelby County Football Show, and we'll see you this Friday night.